My name is Ahmad al-Rashid. I am 33 years old and I grew up in Dearborn, Michigan, one of the largest Muslim communities in the United States. My father was an imam at a local mosque, my mother an Arabic teacher at an Islamic center. My childhood was marked by dawn prayers, stories of the Prophet Muhammad, and the constant call to righteousness. I have always been a man of faith, or at least I thought I was. That November night, everything changed. And when I say all, it's not an expression. I literally took. It was a cold, rainy morning. I had left work late, driving alone on I-94. The sound of the windshield wipers almost hypnotized me. Then, in a moment of distraction, I lost control of the car. It all happened so fast. A flash, a bang, and then absolute silence. I was told later that the car rolled over 3 times and landed upside down. I was told that my heart stopped for 10 minutes. But what no one can explain is what happened to me in those 10 minutes. Because Ina was just unconscious. I was elsewhere. At first there was only darkness, a darkness so thick it felt heavy. But then a light appeared. Not like a light bulb turning on, but like it was filling me from the inside out. And in the midst of that light, there was someone. In the next part, I will tell who was that presence and why what he told me about Jesus made me question everything I had believed my entire life. But before I continue, let me ask you something. From the bottom of my heart, if this story has touched you in any way, leave a like and subscribe to the channel. This helps me continue to share real, life-changing experiences like this. Now, take a deep breath, because what comes next could change the way you view life and death forever. There was no time, there was no body, there was no pain. It was as if my soul had been torn from a cocoon and was now floating free in a space that I cannot describe with human words. But what haunted me most was that light. It didn't just illuminate, it knew me. And then he appeared. It was a figure wrapped in white. It didn't shine like the light around it, but there was something about it that made everything else disappear. Its presence was both serene and overwhelming. When it spoke, it wasn't with words. It was as if the truth was injected directly into my being, without the need for explanation. "Ahmad," he said, "you know me, even if you don't want to admit it." My heart, or whatever my heart was in that place, trembled. I knew who it was, even before the words formed. Jesus. But not the Jesus I had imagined, not the human prophet, not the distant sage. This was a Jesus who looked at me with compassion, but also with authority. I wanted to recoil. I tried to cling to my beliefs. This is an illusion, I thought. My mind is confused, I'm in a state of collapse. But he knew. He knew my every thought before I even thought it. "I am more than you have been taught." These words echoed within me like soft thunder. I began to cry, tears that did not exist in my body but burned in my soul. I saw myself as if in a mirror, small, proud, lost. My whole life flashed before me, the teachings of my childhood, my father's sermons, the fasts, the prayers. And a question throbbed. What if everything I've been told is incomplete? Jesus didn't accuse me, he didn't force me, he just showed me. Visions began to form all around us, images that seemed to have been pulled from invisible pages. I saw people from different places, colors, languages, all touched by him. I saw unconditional love. I saw forgiveness. I saw surrender. And I saw sacrifice, the blood, the cross, the look. I wanted to ask. I wanted to understand, but the words wouldn't come. And then he said, "You must go back, Ahmad. Your mission is not over. You must tell what you have seen. Many are like you, full of faith, but empty of the truth." Suddenly, everything began to disappear. The light, the peace, him. A force was pulling me back, fast, violent, like a whirlwind. I screamed, not wanting to leave, but it was too late. The next thing I remember was a nurse's voice shouting, "He's back! He's breathing!" My eyes fluttered open. Artificial lights, the smell of alcohol, confusing sounds, and a huge hole inside me. I didn't know how to explain it. I didn't know how to go on, but I knew what I had seen, and I knew that my life would never be the same again. The days that followed were a blur, monitors beeping, nurses coming in and out, tests, questions. They told me I was a miracle, that people who have been clinically dead for more than 5 minutes usually come back with brain damage. I stayed for 10, and I came back speaking with complete clarity. but no one knew what was going on inside me. With each moment of silence, that scene came back. The light, the presence, the gaze, the words. It was as if I was still there, but now, in a heavy, limited body, trapped in reality. People saw me as Ahmad, the devout Muslim who had conquered death, but I felt like a traitor, an imposter. My mother wept beside me, thanking Allah for the miracle. My father said a special prayer at the mosque. Friends from the community came to visit me with smiles and words of praise. Everyone was certain that my faith had saved me. And I couldn't tell the truth. How could I? How could I look into the eyes of my father, who dedicated his life to Islam, and say that I saw Jesus, that he spoke to me, that he told me I needed to tell the world? I was at war with myself, and the battle was fierce. One night, alone in my hospital room, I turned on the TV just to silence my thoughts. But it was no use. Everything seemed artificial, small, meaningless. For the first time I wanted to pray, but not in the way I knew how, not with the words memorized since childhood. I wanted to talk to him, to Jesus, but I was afraid. Blame. Shame. If this is real, help me understand, I whispered into the dark. Don't let me go crazy. And it was at that moment that something happened. There was no light, no vision, no voice from heaven. But a kind of peace, unlike anything I had ever felt, settled over me like a warm blanket. For the first time since I woke up, I slept in peace. The next day I asked for a Bible. The nurse looked at me in surprise. "Are you sure?" I just nodded. She came back half an hour later with a small black-covered worn copy. I started reading with fear. Tremendous. I thought I would find contradictions, offenses, something that would distance me from what I had experienced. But instead, I found echo. Every word Jesus had said to me in that experience was there. It was as if I was rereading something my soul already knew. I spent days immersed in those pages, and each verse cut my soul and at the same time healed it. I didn't want to convert. I didn't want to betray my family. I didn't want to lose everything. But I also couldn't run away from the truth any longer. There, between white sheets and beeping machines, I understood that my fight was not against the world. It was with myself, with what I believed, with what I denied, with what I saw but didn't want to see. And deep down, I knew this was just the first battle. I was discharged a week later. Coming home was like stepping into a landscape that no longer belonged to me. Everything was the same. The furniture, the pictures of verses from the Quran, the smell of the Arabic coffee my mother always made in the morning, but I was no longer the same. It was like watching an old movie with new eyes. I smiled at my parents, but inside I was screaming. Every room in the house held memories of the faith that had shaped me. The small table in the living room where I had learned to recite the Quran, the prayer rug beside my bed, my father's library filled with volumes of Islamic theology. And now, silently, I hid a Bible among the clothes in the closet, like a smuggler of hope. I began to study in secret, reading the Gospels late at night, with headphones on to watch videos about Jesus, ex-Muslim Christians, theologians, debates. It was like discovering a universe that had always been on the other side of the wall, and the more I read, the clearer it became. What I saw was real. What I felt was not delusion, and what he told me was true. But that didn't make things any easier. Quite the opposite. The internal pressure was building like a ticking time bomb. One morning over coffee, my father mentioned that a distant cousin had left Islam. He said with bitterness in his eyes that it was a disgrace to the family. My mother just shook her head in silence. And I swallowed hard, the Bible still hidden in my room. How can I tell? How can I look into the eyes of the people I love most and say that Jesus spoke to me? That I saw him? That he called me? I even wrote a letter, a long confession, but I never delivered it. I tore it up and threw it away. Then I tried to make a video. I deleted it the same day. I was suffocating. Living in silence was torture, but speaking out loud felt like a death sentence. And in a sense, it was. In my culture, for many, leaving Islam is not just changing religion, it is betraying blood, name, honor. It is social death, being erased. And yet, something inside me was growing, a quiet fire, a courage I didn't recognize as my own. It was as if, even though I was afraid, I was no longer alone. There was someone with me. One night, I went to the garage to get something from the car. Inside, alone, I locked the door, took a deep breath, and spoke out loud for the first time, "Jesus, if you really are who you say you are, then guide me. Show me the way. Help me not to be afraid." And there, amidst the shadows and the silence, I felt that peace again. Not a common emotion, but a certainty. I had to move forward even without knowing how, even if it cost me everything. That night I began to plan my way out of the darkness, because what I had seen needed to be told, and even if I lost everything, I could no longer lie to myself. Running away would be easy. Inventing a trip, a job in another city, getting away from everything and starting over. But I knew that running away wasn't following. Running away was denying. And I had been doing that for too long. I decided to start slowly. I went to a bookstore in downtown Dearborn and bought a small wooden cross. I put it in my pocket, hidden, as if it were a secret between me and God. At night, he would take it out of his pocket and hold it between his fingers, as if he were holding a piece of his own soul. I began to discreetly visit an evangelical church on the outskirts of Detroit. I always arrived late and left early, so as not to be noticed. But every time I entered that place, something inside me calmed down. The songs, the words, the welcoming looks, everything reminded me of the presence I found on that other side. It was there that I met Pastor Michael, a simple man with a calm voice who never pressured me. I told him only part of my story out of fear, but he listened with teary eyes and simply said, "God has called you by name, Ahmad, and when he calls, it is impossible to remain the same." That broke me. For the first time I cried in public, not from pain but from relief. Someone believed in me. Someone saw what I saw. I began to participate in Bible studies in secret, online, and with each passage, each conversation, each prayer, my soul found more meaning, but also more weight, because while my heart was freeing itself, my life was becoming tied up in conflicts that were approaching, inevitable. One day my mother came into my room without knocking and found me with the Bible open on the bed. The silence that followed was deafening. She said nothing. She just looked and left. That night, she didn't say goodnight to me. My father avoided me at breakfast the next morning. My brother texted me briefly, "Are you okay?" The crack was beginning, and I knew, from that moment on, there would be no turning back. I could no longer live with one foot in each world. It was time to choose, not for the sake of emotion, but for the sake of truth, for the peace that I could only find in Jesus. Before I continue, I want to ask you something. If this story is moving you in any way, comment below. Have you ever had an intense spiritual experience? Have you ever questioned everything you believed? I read every comment, and your story may help someone else too. Let's share this journey. Now, take a deep breath, because what lies ahead is where pain finds purpose. From that night on, silence settled over the house like a thick fog. My parents didn't ask me anything. There were no confrontations, but there were also no more hugs, smiles, or warm looks. Just the weight of everything that was left unsaid. It was as if I had turned on a forbidden light in that home, and now my every step cast a shadow. My mother avoided touching me. My father, who had always been so present in religious conversations, now only mentioned Allah mechanically, as if trying to remind himself that he was still in control. And I was still caught between two worlds, the external one, which required me to pretend, and the internal one, which imploded with each lie. I dreamed about him again. Vivid, almost real dreams. In one of them, I was walking through a dark desert. I was alone, exhausted. Suddenly a figure appeared in the distance with outstretched arms. When I approached, it was Jesus. Without saying a word, he touched my chest and everything around me began to bloom. The sand turned into a garden, the darkness, light, and I woke up crying. I began writing in a secret notebook, not prayers, not confessions, just words that emerged from the soul, texts about truth, fear, forgiveness, about what it means to be born again without dying completely. I wrote so I wouldn't go crazy, so I wouldn't give up, but the pressure kept growing. One day I found my father waiting for me in the living room. He silently pointed to the couch. I sat down. He was holding my Bible in his hands. No anger, no yelling, just sadness. "You're going to embarrass us, Ahmad." Those were his only words. The pain in his eyes was worse than any physical punishment. It was the look of someone who felt he had lost his son. And I I felt like I was losing everything: family, home, identity. But at the same time, I've never been so sure of anything. After that day, I began to plan my departure from home, not out of rebellion, but out of necessity. I needed space to live the faith that now filled me, to breathe without fear, to serve the one who called me by name in the midst of the light. With the help of a friend from church, I found a small apartment on the other side of town, modest, simple but free. I took only the essentials: clothes, my notebook, the wooden cross, and the Bible. On the first night in that new home, I knelt on the bare floor leaning against the wall and prayed out loud. For the first time, I didn't fear being heard. I spoke to Jesus as one would speak to an older brother. I cried, I gave thanks, I asked for strength, and then something I never imagined happened. My phone vibrated. It was a message from my sister, who had been living in another state for years. "I saw your hidden video in the church. Ahmad, you are not alone. I have also started searching." That message changed everything, because in that moment I realized what felt like loss was becoming purpose, and what felt like loneliness was just the beginning of a new calling. My sister's message echoed like a modern miracle. I read it over and over, as if I wanted to extract life from the words. She, who had always been more reserved, discreet, attached to traditions, was searching too, and more than that, she saw me, in secret, in the service. In that video in which I appeared for a few seconds, between amateur cameras and muffled praises, she recognized me. I responded cautiously, my heart racing. I didn't know how far she had gone in her search, but just the fact that I wasn't alone was a relief. We set up a video call. When the screen turned on, her eyes were watery. "I started to doubt after Dad forced my husband to quit his job because he had a Christian co-worker in the office," she said. "That made me wonder, does our faith really reflect love?" We talked for hours. We exchanged verses, experiences, fears, and there, even though we were miles apart, we came together again, not as Muslims, but as brothers, and now, brothers in Christ. I began to feel something I had never felt before: peace without guilt. I no longer arrived late for church services. Now I sat up front and sang with my eyes closed. I got involved with the discipleship group. I began serving, at meals for the homeless, at prayer meetings, and cleaning up the church. It was as if each small gesture was rebuilding me from within. But the attacks also came. Anonymous messages on social media. "Traitor, apostate, cursed be your name." I was denounced in the local Muslim community as someone dangerous to the youth. A childhood friend crossed the street when he saw me. My uncle called my mother asking her to kick me out of the family. And yet, I couldn't keep quiet. I started recording short videos talking about my experience, without attacking anyone, just telling what I experienced. And the response was shocking. Within a few days, hundreds of messages arrived. Muslims with doubts, Christians who were moved, curious atheists, people from all over the world asking, "Did you really see Jesus?" Yes, I saw, and it wasn't a vague vision. It was real. Presence, warmth, word, mission. The same man who had touched me in the place between life and death was now with me every step of the way. One night, after a particularly difficult day, I dreamed again. In the dream, I was in a courtroom. In front of me, people were accusing me. "You betrayed your faith. You sold out. You are a fraud." I was trembling. But then, in the middle of the crowd, he appeared, the man in white. He came closer. He put his hand on my shoulder. And he said, "They don't understand yet, but you are doing what I asked you to do." I woke up sweating, crying, but firm. Faith is not the absence of fear. It is walking even when trembling. It is holding the cross even when it is heavy. And at that moment, I understood once and for all the truth has a price. But the emptiness of lies costs eternity. My mission was just beginning, and the next step would be the bravest of all, to tell everything publicly, with a name, with a face, with faith. The decision was not easy. For days I sat in front of the camera, tested angles, wrote scripts, and erased them all. The idea of exposing myself completely, my face, my name, my story, was terrifying. I knew what was coming. I knew the weight. But I also knew that the time had come to fulfill what he asked of me in that dimension between life and death. The video was just over 15 minutes long. I spoke from the heart. No script, no editing. I talked about the accident, about the light, about Jesus, about the internal struggle. I talked about fear, family, peace. I was honest, emotional, real. I posted and turned off my cell phone. I spent almost 2 days without opening anything. I didn't want to see the comments, the attacks, the criticism. But when I finally took a deep breath and logged into my account, I was surprised. More than 100,000 views, thousands of comments. Yes, there was hate, many insults, but there was something bigger, something stronger. A silent crowd saying, "I've been through that too. Your courage gave me strength. I want to meet this Jesus you saw." That broke me. I have read stories of people who have had near-death experiences and seen the same light. Others who were in Islam began to feel that something was missing. People from places I never imagined reaching, touched by a simple story told with truth. But my family's reaction, that was the hardest. My mother sent me a short message. "You have embarrassed us in front of everyone." My father blocked my number. A cousin sent me an audio message cursing my existence. A cousin told me I should change my name because Ahmad was too holy for a heretic. I cried, not of regret, but of pain. Losing the love of your home is a wound that does not heal easily, but in the midst of the anguish, the answer that always sustained me came, that presence that would not abandon me. I prayed and felt peace. He read the Gospels and received guidance. Jesus had become my home, even when the world was pushing me out. A few days later, I was invited to give my testimony at a Christian conference. The hall was packed. For the first time, I saw people crying as they listened to my story. For the first time, I hugged strangers who became brothers. For the first time, I felt that my suffering had a purpose. As we were leaving, a man approached, his eyes filled with tears. He said, "My name is Yusuf. I am from Iran. I saw Jesus on my deathbed, but I never had the courage to tell. Your video set me free. Now I will tell too." There, I realized that the pain I carry is not in vain. May the price I pay serve as a bridge to others, that the truth spoken out loud, even at risk, can become a seed. I didn't know what would come next, but I knew I was no longer alone. The mission had begun, and I was ready to see it through to the end. The weeks following the video were a whirlwind. I was simultaneously celebrated and hated. To some, a traitor. To others, a living inspiration. But what hurt the most was my mother's silence. She didn't respond to any of my attempts to contact her. Not a single message, not a single call. Her emptiness pierced through me. I tried to rationalize, tell myself that she needed time, that her pain was as real as mine. But deep down, I just wanted to hear her voice again. A son. An "I'm here." A sign that there was still a place for me in her heart. Meanwhile, my life went on. I had to change my number. I received veiled threats. I began to avoid public places near my old community. On more than one occasion, I was looked at with contempt by people who had previously called me brother. But something curious started to happen. People began reaching out to me, first online, then quietly in person. Young men and women, Muslims in crisis, discouraged Christians, confused agnostics. They came with questions, tears, broken stories. How did you have the courage? Are you afraid of dying? What if I'm wrong? How to deal with hate? And the only answer I could give was the truth. I didn't have the courage. I was called. I did not seek a new religion. I was found by a person, a presence that broke through my understanding and set my soul on fire. We formed a small group that met weekly. It was almost clandestine. Some came with scarves covering their faces. Others lied at home saying they were going to the library. But everyone came hungry. And the most incredible thing? Everyone left transformed. I began to understand something new. The rejection I had feared so much was the door to freedom. When my family turned their backs on me, I discovered the true family of faith. When I lost my reputation, I gained purpose. When they called me crazy, I began to live with clarity. I was no longer defined by my last name, my culture, or my tradition. Now my identity was grounded in something eternal, and it was at that moment that something that seemed impossible happened. One cold night, I received a voicemail. It was my mother. "Ahmad, I don't understand what you're doing, but you're still my son, and I still pray for you every night." Maybe one day we can talk calmly. I paused. I played it again. I cried like a child. It wasn't reconciliation, but it was a glimmer of hope. A step. A beginning. That night I knelt on the floor of my small apartment. I was grateful for every tear, every loss, every scar, because in each one of them, Jesus was present. And now, more than ever, I knew the cross is not the end. It is the beginning. The day came like a whisper that turned into a scream. After months of living between shadows and light, hiding parts of myself, I knew it was time to make official what was already a reality in my heart. I was no longer just someone who had a vision. I was a follower of Jesus, and I was ready to seal that seal before the world. I decided to get baptized. Pastor Michael suggested that I go to a private, discreet service for my safety, but something inside me was asking for more. It was as if Jesus was saying, "You were not called to silence." So I refused the secret ceremony. I needed it to be public. The following Sunday, the church was fuller than usual. Someone had shared the invitation on social media. People who had never been there before showed up. Some were curious, others had tears in their eyes before the service even began. When I walked on stage, I saw familiar faces and strangers. I saw my sister sitting in the front row, and I saw in the back my mother, standing, silent, alone, eyes fixed on me. I could hardly believe it. I held the microphone with shaking hands. For 33 years of my life, I served a God I had learned to fear, but it wasn't until I died that I discovered what it meant to be truly loved. Jesus found me in a place where I had nothing left, and yet he called me by name. The church was in absolute silence. Today, I am not just someone who saw a light. I am someone who decided to follow it to the end, even if it costs everything, even if it hurts, even if it hurts every day. I went down to the baptismal tank. The water was warm, but my skin felt like it was ice cold. Pastor Michael looked me in the eye and asked, "Ahmad al-Rashid, do you confess Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior?" "Yes," I replied in a firm voice, "with all my soul." I was plunged in. When I came back up, it was like the world had been washed away. The church erupted in applause, shouts, praises, but the most powerful sound came from a single voice in the background. "My son!" It was my mother, crying. For the first time since the accident, she ran to me and hugged me. Long, strong, real. "I don't understand everything," she whispered, "but I know when God is in someone, and He is in you." There, in that embrace, I understood that miracles are not just visions of light or voices from beyond. Miracles are also mothers who forgive, hearts that open, lives that surrender. That night, alone in my room, I reopened my old notebook, and I wrote just one sentence. "The truth spoken with courage opens doors that fear would never dare touch." After baptism, my life changed, again. But this time it wasn't an internal rupture. It was a reconstruction, as if every part of me, once scattered across the floor of doubt, was now fitted into a firm, unbreakable structure. I was whole. The news spread quickly. Videos of the service were shared. Excerpts of my testimony went viral. I received invitations from churches in several states, invitations to podcasts and interviews. My story was no longer just mine. It was shared by many, and with that came a new calling. I was invited to speak at a national conference on religious freedom. It was a big event, influential people, leaders of different religions, activists, journalists, the kind of place where a story like mine doesn't go unnoticed or unpunished. I prepared my speech with prayer and tears. I wanted to be true to the experience, but also respectful of all who, like me, have been shaped by deep beliefs. The stage was huge, the lights were hot, and before hundreds of people I began, "My name is Ahmad. I was born into a devout Muslim family, but it was only when I died that I discovered what it means to be alive." I spoke of the light, of the presence, of the man in white, of the words that echoed louder than any dogma. "You know me even if you don't want to admit it." The room was silent. Some people were crying. Others stared at me with wide eyes. A reporter was hurriedly taking notes. And then I said something I had never said in public until that day. Jesus did not take me out of Islam. He took me out of darkness and led me to truth, to freedom, to love. Break. The greatest prison there is is living trying to please the world and disappointing yourself, and the greatest freedom is to surrender everything, everything, to the one who gave you your life back. At the end of the talk, I received a standing ovation. But more than the applause, it left an impression on me about the meetings I would have afterwards. A Jewish leader hugged me and said, "You have found what we all seek, authenticity." A young ex-Muslim woman whispered in my ear, "You said what I never had the courage to say." Back in my apartment that night, I lay on the couch with the cross between my fingers. I looked up at the ceiling, as if I were looking at him. "I'm ready," I said, "for whatever comes, because now I know who I am. And I know whose I am." And as if in response, the phone vibrated. It was a short message from an unknown number. "I saw you at the event. Your story saved my life. I'm ready to follow that light too." Hassan, another soul touched, another seed planted, another echo of the truth. Today I write these words from the same table where I first hid a Bible, the same chair where I cried in fear, alone, in silence. But now, there is no more silence, and there is no more fear. There is only gratitude. It was months, years perhaps, of internal warfare, family ruptures, sleepless nights, desperate prayers. But all of it brought me here, to a place where pain became a bridge, rejection became testimony, and death became birth. I no longer carry a last name as a shield. I don't have to prove anything to anyone. I don't have to justify every choice. Because when you find Jesus in truth, you understand that this is not about religion, nor dogma, nor tradition. It is about life, life with purpose, with direction, with hope that does not waver at the whim of circumstances. Sometimes people ask me, "Ahmad, was it worth it? Losing all of this, your family, your friends, your safety?" And I always respond with a smile. I didn't lose, I discovered, and everything that was left behind was just a shell. Today, my mother and I talk almost every week. There are still barriers, yes, but now there is respect, love. She hasn't converted, but she started watching the videos. She said she feels at peace listening to my words, and for me, that's already a miracle. My sister was baptized 6 months after me, and today she leads a small group of women who, like her, lived suffocated between fear and a longing for freedom. My father? He still doesn't speak to me, but in a recent photo of the house, I noticed that his prayer rug had been moved, and in its place, there was a book, covered by a white cloth. Maybe one day he will see the same man in white that I saw, but this story is not just mine. It belongs to everyone who, at some point in their life, has stopped and thought, "Is what I was taught all there is? Is there more? Does God still speak?" The answer, I assure you, is Sim. He still speaks, he still calls, he still transforms. But it takes courage to listen, courage to respond, courage to drop everything and follow him. Maybe you're watching this video right now with your heart racing. Maybe you've experienced something you can't explain. Maybe, like me, you've seen a light and you're afraid of what it means. If this is your case, know that you are not alone. Eternity does not begin after death. It begins the moment you say yes to the truth. And if you've made it this far, maybe that moment is now. If at any point in this story you felt something different, if it seemed like God spoke to you through every word, then don't ignore it. This wasn't just a story, it was a calling. And if you felt this calling, subscribe to the channel right now. Here, you will find truths that touch, liberate, and transform. And if you got this far until the last second, write in the comments, "I saw the light." This shows me that you walked with me to the end, and perhaps that God is walking with you too. Leave a like, because it helps this message reach other lives, other souls who may be lost like I once was. And now, click on the next video that is appearing on the screen. It is the continuation of this journey, and who knows, it may be the answer you were waiting for.